In the previous two sessions, we covered the benefits of an automated CI/CD pipeline and how to automate infrastructure as code using some of the cloud native as well as open source tools. The overarching theme for both those topics was also to put out the best practices, implementation recommendations to help you design your Google Cloud deployments so that it best manages your business needs. And that is the idea behind today's session as well. We want to kind of top it off with sharing the guiding principles that one needs to keep in mind while designing any software system on cloud. Next slide, please. A little bit about our hosts for today, Abhinav Bhatia from Google Cloud and Nikhil Koduri from CS. Abhinav from Google Cloud is a customer engineer and has been a part of the Google Cloud team since 2 years now. He has been involved in large solution design discussions, helping customers realize the value from migrating to Google Cloud. Right? And he is a subject matter expert in the infrastructure modernization domain within Google Cloud. Then we have Nikhil from Sears, who is a research engineer and who also leads engineering teams in delivering some of the most complex cloud technology related projects. His work involves architecting solutions and carrying out research in various domains like cloud, DevOps, and big data. Right? So we definitely have a lot of good insights coming our way delivered by these guys. Next slide, please. Yeah. Quick glance at what do we have in store for today. So we will start with a view of the main pillars which which one needs to keep in mind while designing a system using the Google Cloud architecture framework. Then we will deep dive into all the individual pillars one by one, and Nikhil will start by recapping some of the things that we learned in the previous two sessions to define operational excellence. Then we will cover defense at depth, how to secure your cloud environments at various levels, application and infrastructure, and what are some of the most commonly overlooked security threats. And towards the end, we will talk about how to balance performance and cost optimizations in your deployments to deliver business value at the lowest price point, right? So that is what we have for today. Before we actually jump into the main content, I would quickly take a couple of minutes to introduce Sears. Now, we are a niche cloud engineering business that was born in the cloud. In fact, we've been a technology-led business transformation company for the last 16 years. Driven by the idea of driving technology-led digital transformation, we're now one of the top cloud and analytics solutions and engineering company in APAC, Europe, and the United States. We work with organizations in multiple geographies and specialize in infrastructure and application modernization, data management, and data engineering implementations. We are also a premier partner with Google Cloud and work very closely with them on a number of various projects and customer engagements. Next slide, please. We have a footprint in 14 locations across the globe with over 3,000 customers, over 300 engineers, having over 150 professional and associate level Google Cloud certifications. We cover almost all the major verticals, industry verticals, and provide highly tailored solutions based on the client's use case and problem area. With that, I think I will hand it over to Abhinav, who will take us through the design pillars that one needs to keep while designing software systems on Google Cloud. So over to you, Abhinav.
Sure. Thank you, Karthik. So guys, my name is Abhinav, as Karthik said. I'm part of the infrastructure modernization customer engineering team here at Google Cloud, looking after customers in northern and eastern parts of the country. I think I've met some of you, not all, but we've met in our prior discussions. So as part of this customer engineering team, we help customers in their digital transformation journey by helping them modernizing their foundation layer, which is infrastructure, on top of which you are running your apps, your descriptive and predictive analytics, your chatbots and whatnot. So infrastructure is that foundation layer which we help to migrate, which we help to modernize. Just want to take you through this particular slide. Why do customers across the world choose Google Cloud, it's primarily because of these 5 different reasons. Number one is security, which is a very key differentiator for us. Forrester has named us a leader in this space, both in cloud native and data security in 2019. We have built security through progressive layers that delivers a true defense in depth strategy. So you would notice that there are security layers and controls that you can define at an internet layer or a network layer perspective, at storage perspective, at hardware layer, and now with confidential VM, we even can do it at a memory level encryption also. At a deployment layer, when you are releasing your code into your infrastructure, we make sure that you have all the tools available at your disposal to make sure there are no vulnerabilities in your code in production. Again, at an operations level also. So again, it's a very key area in which we differentiate. At Google Cloud, we've set a very high bar for what it means to host, serve, and protect our customer data. Security and data protection are very fundamental to how we design and build our products. We start from the premise that as a customer of Google Cloud, you own your data and control how it is used. The next criteria is we are flexible. So if you are building up a new application, we offer a flexibility to write once and run anywhere. So just like in Java, you can write once and because of the platform independent nature of the Java runtime, you can deploy it anywhere. Similarly, with something called as Anthos, which we have, our whole philosophy is that you should write your code once and then you should have the portability to move it or run it anywhere. Again, Google believes that being tied to a particular cloud shouldn't get in the way of achieving your goals. And that's where an open cloud, which we propagate, gives you the power to deliver your apps to different cloud, while again using a common development and operations approach. So that is one reason why people love choice and wants to move to a platform which enable that choice to them. Number 3 reason is that again, if you have noticed or if you've used our products, we strive to make cloud easy to use, automating many tasks. For example, there are scripts that you can write to automate your infrastructure. Config management tools are available. There are many serverless services, especially in the data warehouse section, where with BigQuery, you don't have to manage or the underlying resources or do the performance tuning so that you deliver the most performance. Everything is taken care of by us, and that's where you have the liberty to write only your SQL codes and don't worry about the underlying infrastructure. Also, we embed intelligence in everything, making it easy to use. AI and ML are embedded in almost every one of our products. This year itself, we have released a feature called as Active Assist, which would give you intelligence about how your applications are performing at a resource level. Are they overutilized, underutilized? How are you doing at a security level? How are you doing at a network level? So all the intelligent levers that we gather from the metadata of your application is something that we publish to you, so that you have all the tools at your disposal to take a decision whether to oversize or undersize a particular VM, if you want to reduce the security level of a particular user, all those that you can take care of. And last but not the least, again, cloud for us was a way to bring in the best of Google and the technology that we have developed internally to help you solve problems. And whatever innovation that Google as a company, Google as a YouTube, Gmail, ads company had done internally in order to survive our business, we are bringing it out to our customers. So there are innovations that we have developed and invented in network layer, for example, with Quick, which is a UDP-based encrypted transport protocol, optimized for HTTPS. That is something that you can get out of the box from our load balancers and CDN layer. BBR, bottleneck bandwidth and round trip propagation time, which is again an improved congestion control algorithm, which increases the throughput and decreases the latency, something that you get natively in Google Cloud. There are different innovations that we have done on compute layer, because our orchestration layer is based upon containers, is based upon Kubernetes. That's where we are able to bring a lot of innovations like custom VMs to our infrastructure. So each and every of those innovations that we have done internally is available for our customers to consume through Google Cloud. So these are those 5 reasons that people have, really worked upon and tried to look into the reasons why it differs from other cloud service providers or other infrastructure companies. And that's where we concluded these are the 5 reasons why customers choose Google Cloud and choose to trust us in the longer run. If we can move to the next slide. Yeah, thank you. So Google Cloud has recently published this architecture framework in the month of May, and I have attached a link to the actual white paper in the bottom of the slide. So the intent is that when you are designing an architecture on Google Cloud or anywhere for that matter, you're always translating a business problem or a use case into technology components. So let's say I have a startup, Abhinav.com, let's say with a very special use case of providing face masks or let's say sweater in this winter season to my new users. I am here to capture a new territory, or that's my business model, that's my business use case that I want to establish. Now, at one end, I have taken care of the business. I know where to procure my raw materials from, how to make my finished product, how to market. So I know my target segment, the list of customers I would have. I've hired lots of sellers along with my HR, who has helped me to hire those sellers in the first place. How to take care of the last mile delivery, and there are many more processes that I would have. Now, each of these processes or functions, I'm sure each and every company would have similar or different processes and functions, would have a dependency on technology, and that too on applications. So I would need to have applications to deliver or to fasten or digitize all these business processes or business journeys. And that's where I would initially would purchase some applications. Either there would be some commercial off-the-shelf applications like ERPs or CRMs, or if I have a very, very custom requirement specific to my use case, I would probably hire a vendor, or I would hire developers to develop a bespoke or a custom application. Now that is where system design, if you see, the bottom of the page, becomes of a prime most importance, in which you have to think what are the right systems or components that I should choose for my use case, my business problems. What is my business problem is something, it can be either cost, latency, reliability, availability, whether it should be globally available. I have to think about my business problem. I should translate into systems, and how systems should speak with each other. How can they marry with each other is something that system design takes care of. Cloud would always have different options according to the different use cases that the customers would have. You always start with defining a foundation zone where you ponder on questions like, where would the identities live? Identities of my actual end users who are coming onto my platform purchasing these sweaters or face masks, and identities of my internal employees, the admins who would be working on my platform. What kind of network topology would you have? What kind of connectivity you would have to my end users, to my internal, my offices, my branch sites? What kind of security, firewall rules, billing would happen? So I would first decide that foundation zone. Once I have I'm ready with my foundation zone, I again have to host my application. Again, I would need to decide, there are different options that cloud would provide. There is a serverless way of doing it, in which you don't have to manage the underlying resources. You don't have to take backup or whatever. I mean, you want a third party or a cloud service provider to take care of most of the management, maybe the backup part, or maybe you want to configure backup on your own. So that's where you get a choice whether I want to move to a serverless way of computing, or let's say you want to manage and control a lot of stuff, and that's where you want to host your application on a VM. Or let's say if you have a use case of having more agility and portability, something that you require, and you want to break your application down into microservices, can I host that in containers, is something that you would have to ponder upon. So there are lots of considerations depending upon the use case that you would have. Just take an example of compute, but similar consideration that you have to think on database level. What kind of schema my data would have, SQL, NoSQL, new SQL, or let's say for analytics purpose, what kind of reporting I would have to give, what kind of descriptive and predictive analytics I need is something that again, there are considerations around all those components that we have actually listed down in the white paper in the system design. There are questions that we ask, what are the use cases basis which there's a recommendation, again, a point of view on the strategy or the best practices that you should consider on a system design perspective. And that is where I, as a customer engineer, spend most of my time understanding with my customers on understanding their tech stack and translating them into systems which are well integrated to deliver value. Now we've done with the system design fall apart. As a CEO of my new organization, Abhinav.com, I know I have to solve for certain key things. The number one is operational excellence. As operational excellence part, I have to move fast and act fast. I have to take care of my operations, and for that, I have to increase my development and release velocity. I have to make sure that I roll out my products faster in the market rather than my competitors. So that is where I have to make sure that I build my application. Sorry. Yeah.
Go ahead,
Okay.
Abhinav.
Okay. So for that, if I have to release my products faster in the market, I have to make sure that I build my applications faster, test faster, and release fast, so that I might be able to push into a market. Let's say a new product, like let's say a red sweater, which has become a fad in the market, more faster than my nearest competitor, which everyone is talking about. And once it is deployed, I have to monitor both my systems and business metrics. So again, at this point of time, I have to define what are the metrics that I want, what are the business metrics, the KPIs, and how can I measure the health of all these business as well as system metrics. Again, my intention and my objective would be to eliminate toil by eliminating or automating fixes for errors that you see frequently, so that you are able to automate most of the activity. So this is something that Nikhil would talk about in depth. The second factor is that the show also must go on. So even in case of if the region in which I'm hosting or my cloud for that matter goes down, the destiny of my business should not be tied up with the destiny of the cloud service provider or any of the other third-party vendor. You should try to reduce as much dependency as much possible. So that's where you have to think about high availability or disaster recovery kind of an architecture. And that's where decisions like what is your recovery time objective or recovery point objective becomes of a prime most importance. Number two is security. So security is always a shared responsibility on cloud. But I have to be very, very particular about it. I need to plan my controls so that my data remains secure. Only the persons with the right credentials are able to access it. If you understand, there's a principle of least privilege that is very, very common in cloud, which requires that says that every module, such as a process, a user, or a program, must be able to access only the information resources that are necessary for its legitimate purpose and nothing else. So we have to ensure that there's a principle of least privilege that is being followed. A user would only get those permissions which he actually wants, and not let's say a owner or a root level permission. I would only give a person, let's say, an instance admin permission if he's only managing the instance. So as a new business, it is very, very important for my users to trust me also. Again, so I have to upload the right to privacy of a user, which are again part of my compliances, which says that every individual has the right to control his or her own data. And there are many other compliances that probably, if I'm storing my credit card details, again, PCI DSS is something that I might have to comply to. So again, that becomes a very, very important lever for me to decide what kind of compliances that my business or let's say my industry would comply to, and whether I'm meeting those compliances through my cloud service provider. Third is reliability. Again, a very, very important lever, because only if my systems are reliable, then my user would keep purchasing from me, because only then my user would know that if I add this product or let's say this red sweater in my cart and click on a payment, I am sure that my payment would go through. So I have to build that trust, that reliability with my user. And that's where, again, for reliability for user facing workloads, reliability is always defined by the user. So for user facing workloads, you should always measure the user experience. For example, query success ratio, as opposed to just the server metrics such as CPU usage. CPU usage is also very important to monitor, but at the end of the day, you should also measure your KPIs. For example, for batch and streaming workloads, you might need to measure KPIs, key performance indicators, such as rows being scanned per time window to ensure a quarterly report is on track to finish on time, as opposed to just server metrics such as disk usage. But again, I'm saying the CPU utilization, RAM utilization, all those things are also important, which give you more information. But again, at the end of the day, you should think about measuring the business level KPIs also. And that's where in reliability, Nikhil would discuss about how to define your reliability goals, what are SLIs, SLOs, SLAs, and error budgets, how to design for scale and high availability again, and how to have efficient monitoring and alerting. There are many more things that we would speak about in that session. And last but not the least, performance and cost optimization as a business is very, very important for us, because if you know about the everyday lower pricing kind of a model, which many of the global retailers push, as a business, because I'm also in a similar domain, I also have to keep my costs lower so that I'm able to generate some profit as this Abhinav.com startup. So that's where I have to think about keeping my cost of the infrastructure as low as possible, and keeping my performance as high as possible. So I also have to strive to increase the performance of my machine so that I'm able to do more business at a lesser cost. So for that, I need to perform the task faster. I have to be more agile, and that's where Nikhil would speak about that particular lever, which are again very, very important for my business. So Google Cloud Architecture Framework is again a point of view from Google Cloud, which you can read in the white paper, which says what are the best practices, what are the strategies that you should have depending upon the business use case, depending upon the system design that you're considering, and considering these 4 different levers that we have. Over to you, Nikhil.
Yeah, thanks, Abhinav. Thanks for introducing us to the Google Cloud Architecture Framework. Now, I'm going to help everyone get into the details of how we can incorporate these architecture framework into actual deployment and actually architecting these solutions and delivering these solutions, and what are the key factors and what are the technical factors that we would have to look into to incorporate things like operational excellence, security, performance, cost optimization, so on and so forth, right? So first we'll start with operational excellence. Operational excellence, nothing but how you are going to help build a foundation for your another principle is reliability, and how your application can be more utilized and you have more resources working into the core principles, that is development of your code and creating business functions apart from monitoring and deploying applications and carrying out mundane tasks, right? So there are 3 basic strategies that we need to take care of, 3 basic strategies that we need to be concerned about when we need to achieve operational excellence. Like, first thing is you have to automate, build, test, and deploy. So whatever builds that you're carrying out, whatever testing that you're carrying out, and whatever deployment practices that you're being carrying out, we need to automate these so that we have faster amount of releases, faster amount of pipelines, and the workforce that is working on these applications and your business functions, right, would be essentially working on creating business function and not for how they would be deployed, how they would be functioned. So incorporating CI/CD pipeline, incorporating DevOps is the first strategy towards operational excellence. Next, you have to conduct a disaster recovery testing. So a disaster recovery, if you want and well architect high available solution that is reliable against any kind of natural calamities as well, you need to have your disaster recovery, right? And these disaster recovery techniques that you might be using, we don't have to wait for the disaster to strike. We should be carrying out regular testing for these disaster recovery setup that we have done, and keep it in check that if it is aligned to how my business, because the business will be changing every day, right? You need to keep up your disaster recovery practices to those business changes as well. And finally, you have to monitor the business objective metrics, whatever metrics that you have defined for your business. You have to measure and keep an alert on them in terms to how the application and how the business would be performing. So how do I increase the development and release velocity? So first thing that you have to incorporate release engineering. Release engineering is nothing but the job function that sees how the software releases are built, how frequent the bug releases are you incorporating. incorporating troubleshooting more and more application bug fixes and releasing newer features helps you carry out much faster, much better efficiency in delivering your application, and also contributing to a lesser amount of bugs and lesser amount of time spent for the users to be working on these bugs, right? We don't want our users to be to be not sure about how this application would perform if they want to consume it for a larger scale, right? Next thing is that you have to have automated test pipelines that you're doing and incorporate unit testing, system testing, integration testing while doing your deployments, and making testing a part of your pipelines, making a testing part of your CI/CD pipeline becomes crucial. Apart from this, you also have to incorporate different other testing tools, mechanism like load testing, stress testing, and static testing, right? These also needs to be part of your architecture, needs to be part of your deployment process for you to have a reliable deployment process. And the final thing is anything that you deploy, any kind of code changes, any kind of configuration changes, we have to use Git as the or any kind of central repository for all the code and all the configuration code as well. Or even if you have things like infrastructure as code that we had seen earlier sessions, these configuration needs to be versioned and needs to be stored in Git. Any other kind of source code management tool for you to have everything versioned, everything having an immutable environment, right? And everything that you deploy needs to be versioned so that it makes it easier to roll back and go back to your deployment, go back to the changes that you've done, roll back these changes efficiently. Next, you have to build pipelines, version these pipelines according to the configuration that you're making. These pipeline that you're building needs to be robust and needs to suffice the business requirement that you have, needs to suffice all the changes, the dynamic as well as static changes that your application release would have. You have to build pipeline in such a case that these changes are easy to incorporate, and all your business metrics and all your security level performances, security level checks have been carried out and are also part of the build pipeline. It should not be carried out while the application is done, deployed, and then you would be carrying out these tests and then you would carry out these changes. And the final thing is, once you have all these resources or all these factors in place, next thing you have to be worried about the deployments. The deployment cannot be a straightforward deployment, which can tend into downtime. That cannot be a part of an ideal business use case that I would be hoping for. We need to incorporate things like canary analysis and A/B testing that lets me release smaller chunks of newer versions and have live traffic on these applications that help me analyze how my application is performing and analyze any kind of error or bug that my application would have at an earlier stage and at a very lower level of demographic, right? Next, we have to monitor the system health and the business health. There are a lot of tools that do this for you, but having these tools is not the solution. How to use these tools and what kind of elements I need from these tools are the crux for my deployment, are the crux for my business continuity, right? The first thing is that you need to have a strong logging solution that logs every kind of critical logs that are there. Not only the cloud-specific services that generates a log, but also your application logs and network logs. So these all logs needs to be monitored, and they should be in a centralized location where I can iterate through them easily, manage them easily, just like you have in Stackdriver. You can Stackdriver logging. We can query these logs and get the desired amount of logs and desired amount of metrics from these. Next, we have to define what metrics the application and define what metrics my application would need. Define the metrics that I would need for my application to be functioning. Define useful metrics for the application that are deployed, for the services that are deployed that I would be concerned about. And once I've got these metrics, I can set up different kind of alerting and different kind of checks that I would be carrying out. Finally, once you have these metrics, you will be much more concerned about monitoring the application that you have deployed. Now, since as your application keeps on getting more and more complex, the architecture keeps getting more and more complex, right? Monitoring these applications, monitoring these services, monitoring things like microservice-based architecture becomes a bit tricky. But there are tools and there are services, and also we have tools like Stackdriver that makes it easier for you to incorporate these monitoring solutions and monitor them at a much higher pace and much larger scale, right? Now you have all these data, you have all these metrics, you have all these logs, right? You need to this is no use for a business point of view. If I want to know what is actually happening with my application, what is the actual business value that I'm getting from these, right? So we have to create specific dashboards that makes it easier for the ops team as well as the business development team to monitor what is actually happening and analyze what is actually happening with these metrics that we are collecting. We can create different graphs in Stackdriver, or we can export them to open source tools and Google's tools like such as Looker, and create custom dashboard that would suffice your business use cases. And finally, in any application, monitoring is not the solution. You cannot keep monitoring these applications and these metrics all the time. That's where you try to incorporate alerting and have different kind of alerting mechanisms to have golden signals for your monitoring of a system, application availability, uptime checks, so on and so forth. Next, we have to design our application for disaster recovery. Now, this becomes a very crucial part when you're planning your disaster recovery, right? You have to plan your disaster recovery in such a way that it is able to withstand any kind of mishap that would happen. And you have to be prepared for any kind of situation wherein your application can face major amount of downtime. So first thing is you have to plan your DR effectively. You need to define your recovery time objective. You need to define your recovery point objective, right? And you have to create a plan that has the minimal amount of business impact in case of a disaster recovery occurs. You need to plan different solutions that makes me ensure that all these available services and all the applications that are deployed can be recovered, can be brought up in no time in case of any kind of these failures, in case of any kind of these costs, right? In case of any of these mishaps, right? And I need to have the minimal amount of cost that I would be spending in case of such a disaster cases, right? And still have quickest amount of uptime in case of these applications are down. Next, I have to consider the infrastructure requirements that these DR would have, like the capacity, what kind of security with these DR practices would have. Are they secure enough, or if they are not secure enough, my whole infrastructure can be vulnerable just by having a low level of security, which is overlooked mostly on the disaster recovery and disaster recovery principles, right? We tend to open our architecture to different risks and different threats that are there. We have to plan suitable bandwidth for peak loads in case of disaster recovery that we are carrying out, and we have to look into the network infrastructure that we have configured and how the DNS failovers and how we are managing these. Now, the third option is to carry out a disaster recovery on Google Cloud. Well, Google Cloud can help you reduce the cost of fulfilling the RTO and RPO and still have the highest amount of performance possible, because Google Cloud is a part of the Google Cloud network, is a tightly layered network, as you might have seen in the earlier sessions, how tightly coupled the Google Cloud networks are. The global network connectivity makes it much more easier for you to have disaster recovery in any region and create multiple point of presence that for Google Cloud makes it easier for you to connect your application in a much faster rate, and have a much higher scalability in terms of your disaster recovery and your disaster recovery applications coming up. Now we are going to look into so we have already discussed this. You might have already seen this in the earlier sessions that you might have attended. We're just going to reiterate to them and get into what is the standard life cycle for a standard release life cycle in a release engineering perspective, right? So first you essentially write your code, build this code using any different kind of CI/CD pipeline, different kind of cloud integration, continuous integration pipelines, just as Jenkins or Google Cloud Build, right? Next, you would want to test these applications, test the code that you have built, and see how they are performing. If there are any bugs, if there are any practices that can help them be much more better, much more secure, much more efficient with least amount of error rates, right? And once that's done, you have to package them into containers, or you can package them into deployment files such as jar files, release them out for consumption, and configure your systems to incorporate these changes, incorporate these deployment. And once all these things are done, we have to monitor all the deployments that we have done, monitor the services that we have been deployed. So these are the effective release cycle. You have your continuous integration that carries out your code, build, and your test. And then you have your continuous delivery that packages these application and releases its application, deploys this application in the desired endpoints, the desired end states that you would have. And you finally use configuration management tool to provision the resources that was needed, and provision the services that are needed for this, and configure the system that these applications would be deployed on, and monitor them efficiently. So we talked briefly about how to achieve operational excellence. What are the key factors that we need to be concerned while we are deploying, while we are concerning the operation, concerning our application, designing our application, right? Next, we have to look into how I can make it more secure, make it more private, achieve more privacy, and still keep my architecture under the compliance, the various compliance that my application would have. So if you take an example of an banking firm, right? You have your different compliances that you have to go to. You have your GDPR compliance, wherein your data cannot go out. Right, such kind of compliances, such kind of security threats. You have your CIS benchmarking that you would want to consider, and have your application and have your Google Cloud infrastructure built in that way, and so on and so forth. Right. So we're going to look into how we can make our application more secure, more private, and more compliant. So again, we are going to talk about the strategies that we would need to have to implement in order to have. In order to have a secure environment, right? So first thing you have to do is implement least privilege with identity authorization, right? The amount of access that you'll be providing to the users, as well as the service accounts, and the amount of access that you'll be providing to any external identity that you have incorporated using tools like Okta, right? You have to make sure that you provision the least privilege possible, and have the least privilege access to any kind of resource that you have been deploying an application, whoever it might be, or whatever the role the user might have in the organization. We have to follow least privilege access to these users, right? Next thing, you have to and you can configure them using different IAM tools like custom roles, and having specific special service accounts created for application access, and so on and so forth, and make it a mandate across your organization to use these applications, to use these authorization methods. Next, we have to build a layered security approach, build security at each level, not only at your application level, and also at your infrastructure level, right? You need to have a defense in-depth approach. So any cloud provider, and especially Google Cloud, has its own set of security measures and security factors that they would have that make them the marvel that they are. But then you also have to be assured, and Sharpa also have to be ensured about incorporating these security changes and these security layers on the application layer itself, as well as the infrastructure level. Next thing is that whatever the sensitive tasks that you'll be performing, whatever human-based tasks that would be performing, in case of a secure and sensitive task, right? We need to focus on trying to automate them so that we are not prone to human errors and we are not prone to any kind of manual error that could result in big disaster from our organization, big impact on our business, right? And finally, we have to implement security monitoring. You have to use automated tools to monitor your application infrastructure, have audit logs, and your pipelines to have to scan these applications, incorporate things like container security, container analysis, right? And use things like security command center to analyze the deployed application, analyze the deployed infrastructure, and look into how these applications are performing, and monitor the security challenges and monitor the security aspects of these deployed applications. Now, how do you manage authentication and authorization? So first thing, you have to grant appropriate roles. It's recommended that you don't use the predefined roles and the primitive roles such as the project owner, project editor. So it's a better approach, a recommended approach, to create custom roles for each kind of deployment, each kind of access that you want to provide in your organization. Define these custom roles and roll out these custom roles to different users and different user groups as much as possible. You have to understand when to use service account. We have a limited quota for service account, and you have to identify in what cases I need to use a service account to authenticate, and in what cases I need to use my user identity to authenticate. For every resource, I cannot use a headless service account, right? And look into the deployments. Finally, we have to look into the custom roles that I said, right? You have to understand when I need to use custom roles and when I need to use primitive roles. But the recommended approach would be to go around and look for custom roles itself. Finally, you have your policy intelligence that you can incorporate. The Google Cloud has the I am recommender, I am troubleshooter, I am validator that you can incorporate to have intelligent amount of I am policies that you can deploy that validates and analyzes the usage of the users what services it has been using, and then carry out analysis and gives us recommendations to what the policy should be and what kind of policy I should be attaching to these applications. And finally, we have the cloud asset inventory that helps. It provides an organization-wide snapshot of the inventories in my Google Cloud. I can go through them and get all the data and all the audit data that all the changes that have been occurred and all the resources that have been deployed in the Google Cloud inventory. I can monitor them. I can get a log out of them, and I can analyze them. I'll just pause for checking for some questions. I got some questions. Let me just quickly go for some questions. Oh, I see there's no questions yet.
I think probably we can continue and take the questions towards the end.
Sure, that works for me. Cool. Next, we're going to look into how do we achieve this, right? How do we achieve more security? How do we achieve these kind of security aspects, compliance, and privacy aspects that we are talking about, right? So we mentioned at least with this, right? You treat each component of the application as a separate with a separate trust boundary. So every application should have a similar limited amount of access, limited amount of every user should have. So let's say you have different teams. One is working on application A and one is working on application B, right? Application A uses the application A monitoring team or DevOps team, right? Do not need any amount of access to the application B resources. The VMs where application B is deployed. So we have to treat each component with limited amount of access. Each application you have to deploy, right? So let's just say you have deployed certain amount of application in the Kubernetes cluster. Now these applications do not need access to all the resources that are deployed in Kubernetes, right? Or all the resources that are there in GCP. So then you can incorporate things like workload identity into your deployment strategies, and have service account attached to these application. And each application can have a limited account and segregated amount of access to Google Cloud services, right? And also you have to restrict who can use the service account and act as the service account, and give the smallest amount of scope possible to the VMs. And better approach is to use service accounts for the VMs that do not use the default service account that the VMs would have, and attach custom roles to them so that they have granular access. And in case of defensive depth security, right, you can incorporate the VPC service controls to restrict what amount of APIs that the users cannot write. The user is authorized to access what IP they can access it from. Even the Google Cloud Console can be restricted. The access for Google Cloud Console can be restricted to a particular VPC and particular user in case using the VPC service control, right? Such thing needs to be incorporated and rolled out. Next thing is that auditing any application or any service that you deploy, any kind of resource that you deploy, you need to have a proper amount of auditing incorporated into it, proper amount of logs incorporated into it, and have a cloud audit. So cloud audit log helps you audit all the changes that are being carried out in the IAM policy. Any kind of changes that would occur in the IAM policy needs to be needs to have a proper amount of alerts set into it. Every change in IAM policy on a higher level, or maybe on an organizational level, needs to have a proper alerting set to it. Have to export these logs to cloud storage to store for a longer period of time, so that you save cost and have them persistent. And you can use different kind of storage classes depending on the retention period that you have. And you have to replicate the amount of access that you would have, the audit logging, which should be granular as well. The same amount of access should be replicated on the cloud storage as well, so that they are also secure. So that even if the user, in some cases, it's mostly overlooked that we give granular level of access to the audit logs, but then on the cloud storage level we give and combined or higher level of access. This should be avoided, and this should be frowned upon. Next, we have the compute resources that you will be deploying, right? And you have to incorporate security controls and make it more secure as well. Try to use private IPs as much as possible. You can disable the private external IPs to be attached to your VMs from the organizational policies. Incorporating of Google Cloud load balancers and attaching CDN services like Cloud Armor, right? These are the right approach. These are the recommended approach to authenticate and access your application. It's also important to know who is spinning up your app, who is spinning up the application instances, and you can control these accesses to who can deploy resources and deploy services using IAM control. And Google Cloud keeps on releasing new images, Compute OS images that have the newest amount of patches, the newest amount of bug fixes and functionality fixes that can be rolled out and needs to be configured and needs to be updated again and again. In case of when you're using Kubernetes service, right, you can incorporate a GKE sandbox wherein you can have multi-tenant deployments and different teams working on the same Kubernetes cluster, yet have isolation from their host kernel, and yet you can have your in conventional sales you can have your development as well as your staging running in the same cluster, and still would not affect the application deployment that you have for staging cluster. And GKE also integrates with various partner solutions that helps you carry out runtime security for the applications that are deployed. So you have a robust monitoring solution and a robust way to manage your deployments. And finally, we have to incorporate Cloud Security Command Centers, which collects all these matrices and act as your SIEM tool. And you can export these, export the metrics collected, export the analytics collected from these applications and Cloud Security Command Center to any third-party tool that you have, such as Forseti, also which is widely used in Google Cloud, to monitor, have proper amount of alerting and analyze what is essentially happening with your applications, right? Now we talked about how to secure your compute, how to architect your compute in a more secure, compliant way. We have the crux of the major amount of threats or major amount of attacks that would happen, usually happen if there are any vulnerabilities on the network layer, right? So we have to make sure that our network is tight, and there's no open gaps in a network that exposes us to any kind of security threats or any kind of open blockers or open loopholes that can affect the applications, right? The first thing is that you have to incorporate firewall rules into it. We have every cloud provider has firewall rules, that's for sure, but you have to use them in such a manner that it is as granular as possible, as defined as possible. You cannot have public IPs exposed into it, have granular level of access, with the help of tags. And the recommended approach to deploying firewalls is using the service account, which you can do in Google Cloud. Next is we have to analyze the network packet that is coming into the infrastructure, coming into the network. You can use the VPC packet mirroring that you can use to troubleshoot if there are any suspicious packets that are coming into the organization, coming into the infrastructure, and you can identify them, scrape them off. Next, you have the traffic management. You can use the routes for routes in the VPC for the GCE level deployments, and have limited amount of scope for all the VMs, as I have earlier discussed. For the GKE kind of deployment, you can use the traffic director to manage the envoy management, or incorporate open source tools like Istio, or even use the Istio GKE add-on to manage the traffic flow across your cluster and within the cluster. Next, the connectivity that we would be configuring for the application should always be private and should be through a private channel. And we have to evaluate Cloud VPN, Cloud Interconnect, and Partner Interconnect. We have to prioritize these private connectivity solutions more and more over using public internet connectivity, right? And finally, we talked about Security Command Center again. We're going to Security Command Center also has different kind of intelligence solution, that such as the Network Intelligence Center, and Cloud Security Command Center has its own security measures that let you analyze what kind of security threats that you're facing, and if you have the premium version, you can even check what kind of CIS benchmarks that these applications are or these vulnerabilities are at what level, at what priority level they are. And you can even have predefined solutions that you can find there, and you can incorporate them. We talked about we talked about how to secure an infrastructure, how to secure the network. Now we're going to talk about how we're going to secure the data that you have. So you can any kind of data that is there, that is transferred or that is stored in Google Cloud and Google Cloud Storage, is encrypted using Google Managed Keys. You can also bring in your own managed keys to encrypt these data and have, or else if that's not the case, then you can use the Google Managed Keys for encryption and storing of the data. Now, the storage that you would be using needs to be secure as well, needs to have a right amount of access controls, defined onto it, and object versioning for the storage needs to be enabled in case of any kind of manual error and manual deletion. Object lifecycle policies and object versioning should be enabled so as to save cost, maintain the integrity of the data that we are storing on the storage, and make sure that we have high availability solutions for these application data that we are storing. And we need to have the defined amount of granular level of ACL over the objects that that you'll be storing on the storage, or the data that you'll be storing anywhere, right? You can also use the encryption methods for the customer supplied key or the customer managed encryption keys to secure the data and have the right amount of access to these data as well. And the database that you'll be using, right? If you're using things like Cloud SQL, or if you're using any other managed service for databases, right? They come in with the network security, they come in with the network access controls, and the private IP connection via private IP and so on and so forth. But the database access, that the instance level access as well as the database level access should also be controlled, should also be contained, so as to make their application performance, application deployment more secure. and more reliant and more private in terms of threat and exposure to any kind of threats, right? And finally, you have to incorporate implement data security if you have sensitive data such as credit card details and so on. You can use things like you can use here a cloud DLP to incorporate and mask out these elements of data that should not be exposed in any which ways, and protect the data and protect the data integrity that you have not be exposed. Even if they are exposed, they should not be easily available for them to consume, right? Having the data with you can not always be mean that you can gain knowledge out of it, right? So you need to make sure that these security parameters and these encryption and these you can use cloud DLP to secure the data that you would have. This is a sample architecture that you would deploy to have how you would authenticate or how to authenticate users and developers into your applications, right? So for general deployment that you would have, all the application that you deploy, all the VMs that you deploy should have private IPs. And for the developers to gain access into these applications, you should consume have a bash and host that acts as a proxy layer for you to jump host into these servers. The better approach now would be to use the IAP that lets you have the VPN-less solution and direct without having a public IP for the VM. You can log into private IPs, private IP-based VMs directly to using the IAP SSH and tunnel-based IAP tunnel-based SSH, right? And for the application that should be exposed externally, application endpoints, you need to incorporate the Google Cloud Load Balancer that gives an extra layer of security, and have CDN and Cloud Armor CDN and Cloud Armor enabled onto them, so that the Cloud Armor acts as your WAF to ensure that it gives you that extra level of security against the OWASP security, and CDN for higher content delivery and higher distribution of your application. And any kind of attack that would happen on the POP level and not on the load balance and application level. So we talked about security, how we can make our application more secure, how we can make our application more compliant. Now we would be looking into how I need to achieve reliability in my application, how I can make it more reliable. In sense of higher availability, what kind of things and what kind of checks I need to ensure in case I need to have my application to be architected in a more scalable, highly available, and have automated change management incorporated into them. That my application must be self-healing as much as possible, and it must be instrumented for observability. I need to have right amount of access and right amount of outlook into the applications that have been deployed into my infrastructure, right? So the best practices to carry out and ensure that you have a reliable solution is that you have to design for scaling and design for high availability, incorporate application and architectural deployments that has high scalability, high availability across regions, across factors such as CPU, memory, and other resources as well. So my application should scale on these particular resources, the number of requests that is coming into my application, number of traffic that is coming into my application. My application should be scaling on those parameters as well. You have to build flexible and automated deployment capabilities, incorporate different kind of deployment strategies that ensures, such as canary and A/B testing and blue-green deployment that ensures that I have minimal amount of downtime when I'm trying to release a new version, trying to release a new feature in my application as well, right? And build efficient alerting system that helps me alert in case of any kind of failure, even if it's within seconds. I need to be informed so that I go back and check into what was the root cause of this failure, what was the root cause of this error, and have to build up a collaborative process for incident management. Every incident that is happening should go through a process, should have a proper process defined into it, like what kind of action should be taken, how we can we can mitigate this next time, and how not to face and how to prevent these incidents to occur. So we have to define our reliability goals, and these are three major steps that you have to carry out to get the most reliable solution, get the most reliable outcome from your application, right? The first is that you have to define your SLIs, SLOs, and SLAs, right? It's a good practice to have your service level objectives, then your have them stricter than your external service level agreements, right? Your service level objectives should, internal service level objectives should be much more stricter, so that you are mitigating these SLOs by yourself. You're identifying them much faster, and you are working on them in much efficient manner before it is exposed to the external SLAs that you would have. You have to design your application to include like multi-tenant identifier for each request and propagate the identifier in each layer of stack. So any kind of incident that is happening, any kind of user request that is happening, or any kind of budget failures that error budget failures that will be happening, you need to have strict budgeting, and you need to have strict concise insights into these SLIs, SLAs, and SLOs, right? Next, you have to use error budgets to manage the development velocity. Check into what kind of error rate I can afford, and if it's going up beyond that, you have to incorporate better development practices, better development strategies into your application deployment, and so on and so forth. The error budget should always be close to zero, or and we try to keep the error budget as close to a zero. And if once it reaches close to zero, you have to slow down the changes and invest in engineering resources to make these services more reliable and more scalable and more efficient, right? So some kind of some example SLIs that you would want to consider is the availability of your application, the latency that your application might be facing, and the quality of the response that you're getting, the quality of the application, depending on the extent to which the content of the response to request varies, right? Like the ideal response should be how ideal a response I'm getting from an application. These kind of qualities, example SLIs, you need to consider and need to take into book. So you have to build observability becomes an important factor when you're trying to incorporate and trying to make your application more reliable, right? Observability is nothing but a concoction of all the logging, monitoring, tracing, profiling, debugging, and all these kind of systems, right? You have to write in your application. You have to incorporate tools into your infrastructure, into your Kubernetes. If you're working on Kubernetes, you need to incorporate things like Istio to have much higher level of observability. With respect to having tracing, having different kind of log entries wherein I can debug, have much better debugging functionality, much better debugging coverage to the application that I'm deploying, the cloud native application or the Knative application that I'm deploying. And periodically you have to audit and prune your monitoring, delete any unused dashboard alerts tracing that you might not be using. That is not, so you might have changes in your application that are not that much of a priority to you, that are of no use to you, as you have discarded that, carried out a rip and replacing your infrastructure, but the existing alerts and existing architecture, existing alerting mechanisms still there. You need to clean those periodically so that you have a clean and only the metrics that you need, and you don't have underlying outliers that would affect your end judgment, right? Next, we are going to next we have to consider the design our application to be highly scalable and highly available, right? You have to design an application that is multi-region with failover, so the databases, your application availability, as well as every kind of deployment that you use, right? Every kind of deployment that you've done needs to be a multi-region, needs to have a multi-regional approach and have failures into it, and you have to monitor the scalability, the application scaling that you have. They should not have any bottlenecks while they are scaling, while they are scaling and replicating themselves, right? So you have to design it such a way that these scalability bottlenecks are eradicated and they are eliminated. And you have to degrade the service levels that you would have. You have to design a service to detect and overload the return quality responses to the user and partially drop traffic rather than failing completely under overload, right? And you have to incorporate exponential backoff into your application, add some chaos engineering to the circuit breaking, and add which these are things that you can do with tools like Istio, and predict what would be the peak traffic. So let's just say you have an event plan, the streaming service, and you have a big event plan in case there's a big football match that's going to be streamed onto your application, right, on the streaming service. You need to predict the peak traffic and plan for them, how do you have to work on them, and finally work on the disaster recovery testing that we've already talked about. You have to be concerned about the disaster recovery testing that you will be carrying out. So the recommendation for these scaling and high availability, right, again, is similar, that you have to use exponential backup with retry logics into your application. Have a multi-regional architecture with automatic failover for high availability and high use cases. You have to have load balancing to distribute these user requests across shards, across regions. Have a global load balancer in front of them. Degrade these applications services as you want, rather than them failing completely, and establish recovery procedures and disaster recovery procedures and test them, right? Final piece of these pillars are the performance and cost optimization. Now we are building on these applications. We are building on these. We are carrying out the security. We are carrying out the reliability. But my application needs to perform at the optimal level. That's what my users want, and I would want for my organization to have the minimal amount of cost that I would be incurring for these applications. So performance brings in customers, and my cost, the incurring cost, lowering the cost can give me more and more profit. So more customers with the least amount of cost would be the most profitable approach for me. So how do I achieve that? Use scalable design patterns, incorporate things that can scale much faster, like Kubernetes, with more optimal level of deployment, more optimal level of deployment of application scaling, incorporating of data proc, and using things like PVM to scale much faster, but at a lower rate. You have to evaluate the performance requirements of the application. Every application has a different performance requirement. You have to evaluate what kind of requirements your specific application would have and try to cater to those, and identify and implement cost-saving approaches. That does not mean I have to give up or I have to make sure that I don't have any. I'm giving up the performance and degrading the performance application, but improving the performance and yet trying to have a cost-saving approach, cost-saving entities towards it. So the best practice again is like to use auto scaling and data processing, which helps you use your application more effectively. You're not over provisioning or under provisioning any kind of resource. Hence, you're saving costs as well as scaling it in a much higher fashion. You're scaling in a much significant fashion. Next, you have to use GPUs and TPUs to increase your application performance. In case you have any machine learning code running or any AI/ML code running, you have to incorporate GPUs and TPUs to make them more faster and make the processing much higher. Identify apps to tune. Identify the apps that you want to tune and make them more reliant, more performant, and consuming lesser amount of resources and highly scalable, right? And analyze your cost, what cost you would be incurring, and try to optimize them. So for auto-scaling and data processing, you can use the Compute Engine auto-scaling. You can incorporate the managed instance group in Kubernetes, managed instance group in Compute Engine to incorporate higher amount of scaling in terms of request, CPU, and memory usage. You can also use the managed instance group for stateful applications now. And if your application is containerized, the approach is to the application modernized, and you can use Google Kubernetes Engine. You can incorporate vertical scaling as well as horizontal pod scaling in Google Cloud, and you already have the most efficient amount of cluster scaling in Google Cloud. And in case of your microservices, we would try to architect them to having more serverless approach. So for me to have a no ops kind of deployment, right, incorporate things like Cloud Run, App Engine, and Cloud Function in my deployment, and have for my data processing, I would use automated highly scalable solutions such as Dataproc, wherein I can run my Spark and big data cores, as well as Dataflow that gives me easier way to optimize pipelines and create my data pipelines, right? So again, for the design recommendations, you would want to ensure that you use Google Cloud Load Balancer to provide a single endpoint, a global endpoint, have managed instance group, incorporate GKE, and have serverless deployments such as Cloud Run, Cloud Function, App Engine to auto scale your microservices. We talked about using GPU and TPUs to increase the performance in case of your application having graphical requirements or any kind of processing of machine learning data, right? You can use the GPU attached to it to your VM. You can attach the GPUs to your VM, your Kubernetes clusters, and try to make them work at a much faster rate and a much efficient rate. Google Cloud also has its tensor processing unit that is designed by Google for specific machine learning workload that gives you the highest amount of output in case of training and using these data and getting inferences out of these data. You have to identify the application that you want to tune, right? You have to trace these application and use things like CloudTrace and Opal telemetry to find out what is the latency, what is causing the latency, and try to optimize these latencies. Use things like Cloud Debugger to have real-time production debugging capabilities, and profile the application using Cloud Profiler to analyze how the application will be performing. There are a few more slides. So next we're going to talk about how we are going to optimize the cost. So there are a few steps that you want to use to carry out optimal amount of cost optimization. Right. First thing you have to do is you have to analyze the applications, analyze the cost that you're saving. You can export them to BigQuery and look into use Google Data Studio or Google Looker or Tableau to look into these data. For where actually you're incurring costs, and try to attack those areas as well. There are some factors that would affect the overall cost. That is the problem of scale. If you don't have right amount of scaling, you're going to over provision or under provision, and going to end up spending a lot more on the application that you are deploying. You would have, if you don't have operational efficiency, then there's no automation, and you're spending more times and on downtime because you don't have proper deployment practices and proper deployment channels and deployment pipelines. And the platform pricing for these applications, right? If you have platform lock-in, and you need to have smarter insights on your cost optimization, and Google Cloud provides additional discounts in terms of CUD and sustained usage discounts, right? So all the data that you have, all the billing data that you've had, you can export them to BigQuery, and which is a simple one-time setup, and you can carry out these analysis and run your analysis using any kind of tools and data analysis tool or data visualization tools to look into your data and attack those pain points for your cost and try to reduce them. You can have cost optimization. You can right size your VM according to the tuning. You can have different kind of move to a different processor unit to have CPU to increase or reduce the CPU utilization and have the quite bigger amount of efficiency. You can have BigQuery slots and BigQuery slots introduced into your application and the BigQuery dependencies that you would have. and aggressively auto-scale on managed instance group and reservations for critical system, right? And you can some of the applications can be made fault tolerant, it can be made stateless, right? And can be deployed on preemptive VMs that have a validity of 24 hours. And you can have a higher amount of scaling with 80% of saving, and have in terms of HPC and high performant deployments, right? You can incorporate preemptive VMs into there. So we talked about sustained use discount briefly. So you can use sustained use discount that is predefined, and you don't have to avail them. The higher amount of use for the higher number of these servers are running, the higher amount of discount you would get on these servers. So if you're running for 2 weeks, then you get 10%, you get 3 weeks 20%, and 4 weeks 30%, and so on and so forth. If this is predefined for you. If you want to reserve resources, then you can use the committed use discount that works on 1 year and 3 year back. So we have the committed use discount that gives you the 1 year and 3 year commit that you can provide, and you can save on those save on the resources, that the CPU and the memory resources that you would be deploying, and utilize them in an efficient manner. We also talked about using PVMs for stateless and high performance computing workloads, right? So there are things like Dataproc clusters and your Google Kubernetes Engine clusters, right? Can incorporate more and more PVMs into it, have higher amount of scaling with least amount of cost. We're going to look into a final piece wherein you can have benefit of moving to containers. Once you move to containers, you can have immutable infrastructure, faster deployment time, reusability, versioning, isolation, portability, right? Such kind of things that you guys might already be aware about by using the container. But what cost benefit containers provide is this is a TCO example of moving to a container. The 10 weeks in application planning, design, and documentation that is you're spending on each application, that can be reduced 4 to 10 times faster time to market with modern containerized applications. Your delivery pipelines are much faster. Your rollout is much faster, and I can see on the console, right, on this slide, how moving to containers can help you reduce your cost, can help you get a better TCO out of the applications that you have deployed, and get the highest amount of cost optimization.
I think that's about it for this session, and thank you all for joining.